I sat across from Patricia's polished mahogany desk, my palms damp against the leather chair arms. Her smile never reached her eyes as she delivered the words that would shatter my world. You're suspended indefinitely without pay. This could go on for a very long time. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead while my heart hammered against my ribs. 5 days until my mortgage payment. Emma needed new school supplies. Mom's medical bill sat unopened on my kitchen counter. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. Can I have 2 hours to handle something first? Her smirk widened as she nodded, completely unaware she had just made the biggest mistake of her career. The walk to my cubicle felt like a funeral march. 23 colleagues watched from their desks, some offering sympathetic glances while others quickly looked away. Sarah from accounting mouthed, "I'm sorry," as I passed her workstation. The entire office knew what had happened within minutes of my leaving Patricia's corner office. My hands trembled as I pulled my cardboard box from the supply closet. Personal photos of Emma at her soccer games, the small succulent plant my mother gave me for my birthday. My favorite coffee mug with "World's Okayest Employee" printed in fading letters. Each item felt heavier than it should as I placed them carefully inside. But packing wasn't my real purpose. While appearing devastated for the benefit of my watching colleagues, I discreetly powered on my computer one final time. My login still worked. Patricia's arrogance had cost her again. For the past 6 months, I'd been tracking irregularities in our vendor payment system. Small discrepancies that most people would overlook. But my community college forensic accounting classes had trained me to spot patterns. Invoice amounts that didn't match purchase orders. Payments to contractors I'd never heard of. Vendor addresses that led to empty lots when I'd driven by out of curiosity during lunch breaks. My fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, downloading financial reports to my personal flash drive. The quarterly vendor analysis, payment authorizations, contract modifications, all bearing Patricia's electronic signature and approval codes. "Carly, I'm so sorry this happened to you." Diane approached my cubicle, her voice barely above a whisper. At 52, Diane had been performance managed out 3 months ago, after 15 years of stellar reviews. The official reason was failure to adapt to new technological systems. But everyone knew Diane could navigate any software faster than employees half her age. "Thanks, Diane, I'll be fine." I kept my voice steady while my mind raced. "How are things going for you?" "Better than expected, actually. I found work at a small firm downtown. The pay is less, but the environment is so much healthier." She paused, glancing around nervously. "Carly, can I tell you something about what happened to me?" I nodded, continuing to pack while listening intently. Patricia didn't just target my performance. She went after Susan too, remember? And before that, it was Linda from marketing. All of us over 40, all of us with decent retirement contributions building up. Diane's voice carried a bitter edge I'd never heard before. "I think there's a pattern here." My blood ran cold. I'd been so focused on the financial irregularities that I hadn't connected the personnel patterns. But now, thinking back over the past 2 years, Diane was absolutely right. 7 women over 40 had been pushed out through various means. Performance reviews, restructuring, company direction changes. I was only 34, but I'd been asking questions about those vendor payments. Questions that apparently made Patricia nervous enough to remove me from the equation. "Diane, do you remember the exact reasons they gave for your termination? The documentation?" Every word. I saved everything." Her eyes narrowed. "Why? Just curious. Stay strong, okay?" After Diane walked away, I continued my digital archaeology. Patricia's email folder was protected, but I had access to the shared financial folders where interdepartmental communications were stored. What I found there made my stomach turn. An email thread between Patricia and HR Director Jake from 6 weeks ago. The subject line read, "Q4 Staff Optimization." I opened it with shaking fingers. "Jake, we need to expedite the Cultural Refresh Initiative. The board is asking questions about our aging workforce demographics. Focus on the usual performance metrics, but add technology adaptation scores. You know which employees I mean. Jake's response was even more damaging. Understood. I'll prepare the documentation for the over 40 female contingent. We can phase them out over the next quarter without triggering discrimination flags if we space it correctly. Patricia's final message in the thread chilled me to the bone. Perfect. Make sure the severance packages include strong non-disclosure clauses. The last thing we need is former employees comparing notes. I quickly saved the entire email chain to my flash drive. This wasn't just about financial fraud anymore. This was systematic workplace discrimination carefully planned and executed over months. But that wasn't the worst discovery waiting for me. Hidden in a subfolder labeled Vendor Compliance, I found contracts with Morrison Construction Services. The name seemed familiar, so I cross-referenced it with our payment records. Over the past year, Morrison had received $237,000 for facilities maintenance and improvement. But our building maintenance was handled by Apex Services, a company I'd worked with directly on facility requests. I did a quick online search for Morrison Construction Services. The business registration showed the owner as Thomas Morrison. But when I dug deeper into public records, I found something that made my hands shake. Thomas Morrison was married to Patricia Morrison Chen. Patricia's maiden name was Morrison. My manager had been paying her brother-in-law's construction company for work that was either never performed or dramatically overcharged, and I was being suspended because I'd gotten too close to uncovering her scheme. The final piece of evidence I discovered nearly made me gasp out loud. In Patricia's draft folder, I found an unsent email to Nathan, our company's CEO. The timestamp showed it had been created yesterday, just hours after our last interaction. Nathan, I need to schedule an urgent meeting regarding Carly Thompson. I've discovered serious irregularities in her handling of vendor payments that could constitute theft. I have documentation showing unauthorized payment modifications and suspects she may have been embezzling funds. I recommend we involve law enforcement immediately. I'll have the complete evidence package ready for review tomorrow. My screen blurred as tears filled my eyes. Patricia wasn't just covering her tracks by suspending me. She was planning to frame me for her own crimes. I quickly printed the email along with all the evidence I'd gathered using the printer 3 cubicles away from mine to avoid suspicion. As the documents printed, I realized Patricia had made one critical error in her plan. She'd given me 2 hours. The suburban diner sat on the edge of town, its chrome exterior gleaming under the late afternoon sun. I'd called Susan 20 minutes earlier using a casual tone to suggest we meet for coffee. Susan Martinez had worked in our procurement department for 8 years before Patricia found performance deficiencies in her quarterly review. Now she was working at Been There Done That, a coffee shop downtown, making $12 an hour instead of her previous salary of $62,000 annually. Susan looked tired but determined when she slid into the red vinyl booth across from me. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the green apron from her new job over jeans and sneakers. I heard about what happened to you today, she said, stirring sugar into her coffee. The news traveled fast. Susan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I leaned forward, keeping my voice low, despite the nearly empty diner. When Patricia terminated you, what was the real reason? Susan's laugh held no humor. You mean besides the official story about my inability to maintain vendor relationships? She shook her head. Carly, I'd been tracking some weird patterns in our contractor payments. Invoices that didn't match the work being performed. I started asking questions. My heart raced. What kind of questions? There's this construction company, Morrison Services, that kept getting paid for building improvements I never saw happening. I walked every floor of our building twice a month doing facility assessments. No construction work was being done anywhere. Susan pulled out her phone and showed me photos. I took pictures of every invoice that seemed suspicious. 43 payments over 18 months, totaling almost $250,000. I stared at the images on her screen. The same invoices I'd discovered in the financial records, but Susan had documented far more than I'd found. Her methodical approach had created an undeniable paper trail. Susan, did you know Patricia's married name is Morrison Chen, as in Morrison Construction Services? The color drained from Susan's face. Are you telling me she was paying her own family? Her brother-in-law owns the company. I pulled out printouts of the evidence I'd gathered. But there's more. She's not just embezzling. She's systematically targeting women over 40 for termination. I found emails between her and Jake in HR planning the whole thing. Susan studied the documents, her expression growing darker with each page. This explains everything. Diane, Linda, Rebecca, all of us. We were asking too many questions or getting too close to retirement benefits. I need your help, I said. Patricia is planning to frame me for the embezzlement. She's meeting with Nathan tomorrow to present fabricated evidence. I need to build a case strong enough to expose her before she can destroy me. What do you need? Everything you have. Photos, documentation records of your interactions with her. But more importantly, I need to understand how she's been covering her tracks. Susan slid a folder across the table. I've been building this file since my termination. Call it insurance. Look at page 12. I flipped to the indicated page and found a detailed timeline of Patricia's actions over the past 2 years. Susan had documented every suspicious payment, every targeting of older female employees, every cover-up attempt. How did you put this together? I may work at a coffee shop now, but I still have friends in the building. People talk to me. They tell me things they wouldn't dare say at work. Susan's eyes hardened. Patricia thinks she's untouchable, but she's gotten sloppy. After leaving the diner, I drove to my ex-husband David's apartment complex. David Thompson worked as an insurance fraud investigator, and despite our messy divorce 2 years ago, I knew he'd help if the situation was serious enough. Our marriage had ended when I discovered his affair with a colleague, but he'd never stopped feeling guilty about abandoning Emma and me. David answered his door looking surprised to see me. His brown hair was longer than he used to wear it, and he'd grown a beard that made him look older than his 36 years. Carly, what's wrong? Is Emma okay? Emma's fine, but I need your professional expertise. I handed him the folder of evidence. I'm about to accuse my manager of embezzlement and discrimination. I need to make sure my evidence is solid enough to stand up to scrutiny. David's demeanor shifted immediately. He'd always been meticulous about his work, approaching every case with the thoroughness that had made him one of the best investigators at his company. Come in. Let me look at this properly. His apartment was sparse but organized. Financial documents covered his dining table from a case he was working on. He cleared a space and spread out the evidence I'd gathered. For 45 minutes, he examined every document with the attention to detail that had attracted me to him years ago. When he finally looked up, his expression was grim. Carly, this is prosecutable. Multiple felonies, wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, civil rights violations. But you need more than this to protect yourself. What do you mean? If she's planning to frame you, she'll have planted evidence. Fake documents, modified records, maybe even forged signatures. You need to document everything in your personnel file before she has a chance to alter it. My stomach dropped. How do I do that? I'm suspended. I can't access the building. David was quiet for a moment, thinking. I have a contact who specializes in corporate investigations. Maria Santos, she's a lawyer who handles whistleblower cases. But more importantly, she knows how to preserve evidence legally. He picked up his phone and dialed. Maria, it's David. I need a favor. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Maria Santos's law office. Maria was a petite woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an authoritative presence. Her office walls were covered with framed news articles about corporate fraud cases she'd won. David explained the basics, she said, reviewing my documents. This is substantial evidence, but I'm concerned about the timeline. If your manager is meeting with the CEO tomorrow, we're working against the clock. Can you help me? I can, but you need to understand something. Once we start this process, there's no going back. Your manager will know you're fighting and she'll escalate her efforts to discredit you. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Emma's confused expression when I'd picked her up from after-school care early today, about my mother's medical bills that would soon go into collections without my income, about Diane, Susan, and all the other women who'd been pushed out of careers they'd built over decades. Yes, I'm prepared. Maria nodded approvingly. Good. Here's what we're going to do. As she outlined her strategy, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not just for myself, but for every woman Patricia had targeted and everyone she might target in the future. But first, I had to survive what was coming next. My phone buzzed with a text message. Patricia, Need you to come in tomorrow at 9 a.m. to discuss your situation. Don't be late. I showed the message to Maria, whose expression hardened. She's moving faster than we anticipated, Maria said. We need to accelerate our timeline. The trap was being set, but Patricia had no idea she was walking into it too. The next morning, I sat in my Honda Civic in the parking lot of Riverside Park staring at my phone. It was 6:30 a.m., and I was about to set a plan in motion that would either vindicate me or destroy what remained of my reputation. My first step was creating the illusion of defeat. I opened Facebook and typed a carefully crafted post. Sometimes life throws you curveballs you never see coming. Feeling lost and considering a fresh start somewhere new. Maybe it's time to leave Illinois behind and start over. I included a photo of Emma and me from last weekend, both of us smiling at Navy Pier before our world turned upside down. Within minutes, the post had 3 likes and 2 sympathetic comments. Perfect. Nancy Williams from accounting was always the first to respond to office drama, and she'd spread this news throughout the building before the morning coffee finished brewing. Next, I called the company's whistleblower hotline from a payphone outside a gas station. The automated system guaranteed anonymity, and I provided preliminary details about financial irregularities in the vendor payment system. I didn't mention Patricia by name yet, but I gave enough specifics to trigger an initial investigation. The seeds were planted. My phone rang as I drove toward the office. Maria Santos. Are you ready for this? She asked. As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, stay calm. No matter what she says, the recording device will capture everything, but it's worthless if you lose control and say something that discredits you. The small recording device was clipped inside my blazer jacket, completely invisible, but sophisticated enough to capture clear audio from 20 feet away. David had borrowed it from his investigative equipment arsenal, and Maria had assured me it was legal, as long as one party to the conversation consented to being recorded. I arrived at the office building at 7:40 a.m., 20 minutes before my scheduled meeting with Patricia. The lobby was nearly empty except for building security and a few early arrivals from other companies that shared our floor space. Taking the elevator to the 3rd floor, I made my way to my former cubicle area. Most of my colleagues hadn't arrived yet, but Nancy was already at her desk, undoubtedly preparing to disseminate my social media post to anyone who would listen. Carly, Nancy's voice carried across the open workspace. I saw your post this morning. And are you really thinking about leaving Illinois? I forced tears into my eyes, not difficult given the genuine stress I was experiencing. I don't know, Nancy. Maybe a fresh start is what I need. I can't fight this anymore. Nancy's expression softened with sympathy, mixed with the excitement of being first to receive exclusive gossip. That's so unfair what they're doing to you. Everyone knows you're one of the hardest workers here. I just want to put this behind me and move on with my life. I wiped my eyes with a tissue. Please don't tell anyone we talked, okay? I don't want to cause any more drama. Nancy nodded eagerly, already planning her morning conversations. By 9 o'clock, everyone in the office would believe I was broken and planning to flee the state. At 8:15, I received a text from David. Surveillance is in position. Rico has eyes on Patricia's office window from the building across the street. Audio equipment is active. Rico Valdez was David's contact, a former police detective who now ran a private investigation service. He specialized in corporate surveillance and had positioned himself with high-powered directional microphones and cameras to document whatever happened in Patricia's office during our meeting. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Patricia. Meeting moved to 9:30. Come prepared to discuss your departure from the company. My hands shook as I typed back, I'll be there. The extra 30 minutes felt like hours. I walked to the employee break room and bought a coffee I didn't want from the vending machine. Jennifer from Human Resources was preparing her morning tea, and she offered a sympathetic smile. Hang in there, Carly. These things usually work out for the best. If only she knew what her department director Jake had planned. At 9:25, I stood outside Patricia's office door, taking deep breaths to calm my racing heart. Through the glass panel, I could see her on the phone gesturing animatedly. She looked confident, almost excited. I knocked softly on the door frame. Come in, Patricia called, ending her phone conversation. Close the door behind you. Her office commanded a view of the parking lot and the small park beyond our building. Awards and certificates covered one wall, documenting her 15 years with the company. Her mahogany desk was impeccably organized, with a single manila folder positioned prominently in the center. "Sit down, Carly." Her tone was businesslike, but carried an undertone of satisfaction. "I'm afraid we need to discuss some serious allegations that have come to my attention." Allegations. I kept my voice small and confused. "It pains me to say this, but we've discovered irregularities in our vendor payment system. Irregularities that trace back to your workstation and login credentials." Patricia opened the manila folder and removed several documents. "These payment authorizations bear your electronic signature, but they're for services that were never performed." I stared at the papers she slid across the desk. They were invoices for Morrison Construction Services, but the signature fields had been altered. Where Patricia's approval codes should have appeared, someone had digitally inserted my employee identification number. "I don't understand," I said, which was completely true. The quality of the forgeries was more sophisticated than I'd expected. "Carly, I want to help you through this, but I need you to be honest with me." Patricia's voice took on a tone of false concern. "These payments total over $200,000. This isn't something we can handle internally anymore." My mouth went dry. "Are you saying you think I stole money?" "Ami." "I'm saying the evidence suggests you modified payment authorizations to approve invoices for work that was never completed. The vendor claims they were paid for services but has no record of performing any work for our company." This was brilliant and terrifying. Patricia had created a paper trail that implicated me while simultaneously distancing Morrison Construction from any culpability. Her brother-in-law could claim he received payments, but never actually did any work, making him a victim rather than a co-conspirator. "Patricia, I swear to you, I never altered any payment authorizations. I don't even have access to modify approvals. Only department managers can do that." "That's what makes this so puzzling," Patricia said, her expression suggesting disappointment rather than suspicion. "Somehow, your credentials were used to override the normal approval process. It is investigating whether your account was compromised, but until we resolve this, I have to protect the company's interests." She reached for her phone. "I've scheduled a meeting with Nathan in 20 minutes. He's requested that you be present to address these allegations directly." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was happening faster than I'd anticipated. Patricia was accelerating her timeline, probably because she'd heard rumors about my supposed plan to leave the state. "Before we go to that meeting," I said, "I need to understand something. How exactly do these payment modifications work? I've never seen this process before." Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly. "It's an administrative function. Managers have override capabilities for emergency vendor payments. So you could modify payment authorizations if you needed to." "Of course. All department managers have that access level." The moment the words left her mouth, I saw her realize what she'd just admitted. Her face flushed slightly. "I'm just trying to understand how someone could have used my credentials for something I didn't even know was possible," I said innocently. Patricia stood up abruptly. "We'll discuss the technical details later. Right now, we need to focus on resolving this situation before it escalates further." She moved toward her computer, and I watched as she began deleting files from her desktop. Her movements were quick and nervous, completely different from her usual composed demeanor. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Organizing my files before the meeting with Nathan." But her fingers were moving too quickly, and I could see her emptying her email trash folder. What Patricia didn't realize was that our company's security system automatically backed up all deleted files for legal compliance purposes. Every deletion she was making was being preserved in a separate database that only IT administrators could access. And thanks to Rico's surveillance equipment, every keystroke was being documented from across the street. My phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Package delivered." That was Rico's signal that he'd successfully recorded Patricia attempting to destroy evidence. Patricia finished her frantic file cleanup and grabbed her folder of fabricated evidence. "Let's go see Nathan now. I think it's time we got this resolved." As we walked toward the CEO's office, I realized Patricia had just made 3 critical mistakes. She'd admitted to having the technical capability to modify payment authorizations, she'd been caught destroying evidence, and she'd accelerated her timeline so quickly that she hadn't properly prepared for Nathan's likely questions. The trap was set, and Patricia had walked directly into it. Nathan's corner office occupied prime real estate on the fourth floor, with windows facing both the parking lot and the tree-lined street beyond. As the company's founder and CEO, Nathan Rodriguez had built our firm from a three-person startup 22 years ago into a regional leader in logistics management. His reputation for fairness and integrity was legendary among employees, but I'd never spoken with him directly before today. He stood up as we entered, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed and his navy suit crisp despite the early hour. At 58, Nathan carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd built his success through hard work rather than politics. "Carly, thank you for coming in during this difficult time." His handshake was firm, his eyes kind but serious. "Patricia has briefed me on some concerning discoveries. I want to hear your perspective before we make any decisions." Patricia placed her manila folder on Nathan's conference table and began removing documents. "Nathan, as I explained on the phone, we've uncovered evidence of fraudulent vendor payments totaling over $200,000. The electronic trail leads directly to Carly's user account." Nathan studied the papers. Patricia presented, his expression growing more troubled with each page. "These payment authorizations do show Carly's employee ID, but I'm confused about something. Patricia, don't all vendor payments over $5,000 require managerial approval before processing?" "Yes, but there appears to have been a system override that bypassed normal protocols," Patricia replied smoothly. "And who has access to system overrides?" Patricia hesitated for just a moment too long. "Department managers and above." Nathan looked directly at me. "Carly, do you have system override capabilities?" "No, sir. I process vendor invoices and route them for approval, but I've never had the ability to authorize payments independently." "Can you explain how your employee ID appears on these authorization forms?" Sir, I took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment everything would either work or catastrophically fail. "Mr. Rodriguez, I believe someone with managerial access used my credentials to authorize fraudulent payments, but I think I can prove it wasn't me." Patricia's face went pale. "Nathan, I don't think we should be having this discussion without HR present. This is turning into an interrogation. Actually, I think we should hear what Carly has to say." Nathan's voice carried a note of authority that made Patricia sink back into her chair. "Go ahead, Carly. For the past 6 months, I've been tracking irregularities in our vendor payment system. I noticed payments to companies that didn't match any work being performed in our building. I reached into my bag and removed the folder of evidence I'd prepared. Morrison Construction Services has received substantial payments for facilities work that I couldn't verify." Nathan examined the documents I provided. "These payments are significant. Have you seen any construction work being performed that would justify these amounts?" "No, sir. I've walked through our building multiple times looking for evidence of the improvements that were supposedly completed. I couldn't find any." Patricia interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "Nathan, this is exactly what someone would say if they were trying to deflect blame for their own criminal activity. Of course, she's claiming the work wasn't performed." "Patricia, let me ask you something," Nathan said, his tone becoming more focused. "You approved these payments initially, correct? Before they were allegedly modified." "I approved payments to legitimate vendors for legitimate work. Someone else altered the amounts and redirected the funds." "But the vendor in question is Morrison Construction Services. Have you ever heard of this company before?" The silence stretched for several seconds. I watched Patricia's face, carefully seeing the exact moment she realized Nathan was testing her knowledge. "I may have approved some payments to them for routine maintenance work," she said finally. Nathan picked up his phone and dialed a 4-digit extension. "Jennifer, can you bring me the vendor registration file for Morrison Construction Services? Yes, right now." While we waited, Nathan continued reviewing the documents. "Carly, you mentioned you've been tracking these irregularities for months. Do you have documentation of your concerns?" "Yes, sir. I've been building a file of suspicious transactions, including screenshots of the payment system, showing when modifications were made." Patricia stood up abruptly. "Nathan, I think we're getting off track here. The evidence clearly shows Carly's involvement in fraudulent activity. We should contact law enforcement immediately before she has a chance to destroy additional evidence. Sit down, Patricia. Nathan's voice carried a sharp edge I'd never heard before. We're going to examine all the evidence before we make any decisions about involving law enforcement. Jennifer from HR knocked and entered carrying a thick folder. The vendor file you requested, Mr. Rodriguez. Nathan opened the file and read silently for several moments. His expression grew darker as he reviewed the contents. Patricia, according to our vendor registration records, Morrison Construction Services was added to our approved vendor list 18 months ago. The application was submitted and approved by you personally. This registry shows the owner as Thomas Morrison. The emergency contact number listed on the vendor application is your personal cell phone. The color drained completely from Patricia's face. That must be a mistake in the filing system. The application is signed with your full legal name, Patricia Morrison Chen. Nathan's voice was now completely cold. Would you like to explain why you didn't disclose your relationship with this vendor when approving payments to them? I can explain that, Patricia said, but her voice was shaking now. Thomas is my brother-in-law, but I wasn't involved in his business operations. I approved his company because they submitted competitive bids. Competitive bids for what work specifically? Routine building maintenance and improvement projects. Nathan turned to me. Carly, in your role processing invoices, did you ever see detailed specifications for work performed by Morrison Construction? No, sir. The invoices were always vague. Things like facility improvements or maintenance services without specific details about what was actually done. Nathan stood up and walked to his window, looking out at our building's parking lot. When he turned back to face us, his expression was grim. Patricia, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you authorize payments to your brother-in-law's company for work that was not performed? Absolutely not. Any suggestion that I was involved in fraudulent activity is completely false and frankly insulting. Then you won't mind if we have our facilities team conduct a comprehensive audit of all work allegedly performed by Morrison Construction over the past 18 months. Patricia's hands were visibly trembling now. Of course not. I welcome a full investigation. Excellent. I'll also be asking our IT department to pull the complete electronic logs for all payment modifications, including timestamps and user authentication records. Nathan sat back down and fixed Patricia with a stare. If the electronic evidence shows that managerial override codes were used to modify payments, we'll know exactly who made those modifications and when. Nathan. I think you're being influenced by an employee who's clearly trying to save herself from criminal prosecution, Patricia said, but her voice lacked conviction. Actually, I think I'm beginning to understand what really happened here. Nathan picked up his desk phone. Security, I need you to come to my office immediately. Patricia jumped up from her chair. This is ridiculous. I've served this company loyally for 15 years and now you're treating me like a criminal based on accusations from a suspended employee. Patricia, sit down. We're not finished here. But Patricia was already moving toward Nathan's computer terminal. I need to show you something that will clear up this confusion. I watched in amazement as Patricia actually attempted to access Nathan's computer, presumably to delete additional evidence. Nathan immediately stood up and moved between her and his workstation. Step away from my computer immediately. I was just trying to pull up the vendor management system to show you the legitimate work orders, Patricia said, but her actions had crossed a line that even Nathan's patience couldn't tolerate. Tom Williams, our building security chief, appeared in the doorway. He was a former police sergeant with 20 years of experience, and he immediately assessed the tension in the room. Mr. Rodriguez, you called for security. Yes. I need you to escort Miss Morrison Chen to her office to collect her personal belongings. She's suspended pending a full investigation into financial irregularities. Make sure she doesn't access any computer systems or remove any company documents. Patricia's composure finally cracked completely. You're making a huge mistake, Nathan. When this investigation proves I'm innocent, I'll be talking to my lawyer about wrongful termination. That's your right, Nathan replied calmly. But until this investigation is complete, you're banned from company premises. As Tom escorted Patricia from the office, she turned back to glare at me. This isn't over, Carly. I have evidence that will prove your guilt, and I will make sure everyone knows the truth. After they left, Nathan and I sat in silence for several moments. Finally, he spoke. Carly, I owe you an apology. I should have been paying closer attention to what was happening in my own company. Mr. Rodriguez, there's something else you need to know. Patricia wasn't just embezzling money. She's been systematically targeting female employees over 40 for termination. Nathan's expression hardened further. What do you mean? I handed him the email chain I discovered between Patricia and Jake in HR. As he read, his face grew darker with each message. This is beyond financial fraud, he said quietly. This is systematic discrimination. Yes, sir, and I believe she was planning to frame me whole because I was getting too close to uncovering her schemes. Nathan picked up his phone again. Jennifer, I need you to contact our employment law attorney immediately and suspend Jake Harrison pending investigation. Yes, effective immediately. He hung up and looked at me with a respect I'd never seen before. Carly, I want you to know that this company will support you completely as we work through this situation. You showed tremendous courage in bringing this to light, but I knew the real battle was just beginning. Patricia had threatened that this wasn't over, and I had no doubt she would try to retaliate in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The confrontation had ended in my favor, but the war was far from won. The next 48 hours transformed our office into something resembling a crime scene investigation. Nathan had called in an independent auditing firm, and serious-looking people in dark suits moved through our building with briefcases and laptops, examining financial records and interviewing employees. I returned to work on Thursday morning to find my suspension had been lifted and my access restored. More importantly, Nathan had arranged for me to work directly with the audit team using my knowledge of the vendor payment system to help uncover the full scope of Patricia's schemes. The audit team leader was Jessica Park, a forensic accountant with steel gray hair and the methodical precision of someone who'd spent 20 years unraveling corporate fraud. She set up a command center in our main conference room with whiteboards covered in financial flow charts and timelines. Carly, your preliminary documentation saved us weeks of investigation time, Jessica told me as we reviewed the Morrison construction payments. But what we're finding suggests the embezzlement was more extensive than even you realized. The numbers were staggering. Over 3 years, Patricia had authorized $412,000 in payments to fictitious or grossly overcharged vendors. Morrison Construction was just one of 5 companies receiving fraudulent payments. The others included Summit Office Supplies, owned by Patricia's college roommate, Elite Security Consultants, which existed only on paper, Premier Landscaping Services, which had performed no work despite receiving $68,000, and Advanced Technology Solutions, another shell company. But the discrimination scheme was equally systematic and more personally devastating to its victims. Jessica's team had identified 11 female employees over age 40 who had been terminated, demoted, or forced to resign over the past 3 years. Each had received negative performance reviews that contradicted their previous evaluations. Each had been replaced by younger, less expensive employees. By Thursday afternoon, my phone was ringing constantly. Word had spread through informal networks, and former female employees were calling to share their experiences. Diane was the first to contact me after hearing about Patricia's suspension. Carly, I can't believe this is finally happening. I've been carrying around so much anger for months. Susan drove over from her coffee shop during her lunch break. I brought copies of everything I documented, she said, carrying a box of files into the conference room. Financial records, performance reviews, email screenshots, everything. Linda Garcia had been forced out of her marketing position 14 months ago, after Patricia claimed her creative approach was no longer aligned with the company direction. Linda was 51 years old, with 2 decades of award-winning marketing campaigns, but she was now working part-time at a nonprofit for a third of her previous salary. They destroyed my confidence, Linda told Jessica during her interview. I started believing I really was outdated, that I couldn't keep up with modern marketing. It took months of therapy to realize I'd been manipulated. The pattern was always the same. Patricia would identify high-performing women approaching significant retirement benefit milestones then collaborate with Jake in HR to manufacture performance issues. The women were given impossible deadlines, excluded from important meetings, assigned to projects designed to fail, and gradually isolated from their colleagues. Each termination saved the company between $45,000 and $68,000 annually in salary and benefits. Over 3 years, the discriminatory firings had saved almost $600,000 in labor costs. It was a systematic profit enhancement strategy disguised as performance management, Jessica explained to Nathan during Friday's briefing. Patricia was essentially selling access to company resources through fake vendors, while simultaneously reducing labor costs through illegal age and gender discrimination. But Patricia wasn't surrendering quietly. On Friday afternoon, I received a certified letter from Blackwood Stevens and Associates, a law firm downtown. The letter accused me of defamation, claimed I had conspired to frame Patricia through falsified evidence, and demanded I retract all allegations immediately or face a lawsuit seeking $500,000 in damages. This is standard intimidation, Maria Santos told me when I brought her the letter. Guilty parties often try to flip the narrative by claiming they're the real victims. We'll respond appropriately. More troubling was the anonymous email I received Friday evening. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. Be very careful about walking to your car alone after work. Some games have consequences you didn't consider. I forwarded the email to both Maria and Nathan's security team. Tom Williams arranged for security escorts to and from the parking lot and advised me to vary my daily routines. But the most devastating blow to Patricia's position came from an unexpected source, Thomas Morrison. Patricia's brother-in-law contacted our company's legal department on Friday afternoon, requesting a meeting. He arrived Monday morning accompanied by his own attorney, looking haggard and frightened. I want to cooperate fully with your investigation, he told Nathan, Jessica, and the company attorneys. I need to explain how Patricia forced me into this scheme. Thomas's story was both sad and infuriating. His construction company had been struggling financially when Patricia approached him 18 months ago with a proposal. She would arrange for his company to receive maintenance contracts from her employer, but he would need to inflate the invoices and kick back 60% of every payment to her. She said it was standard practice in corporate procurement that everyone did it. Thomas explained, his voice barely above a whisper. I was behind on my mortgage, my equipment payments were overdue, and I had 4 employees depending on me for their paychecks. But Patricia's control over Thomas went beyond simple financial coercion. She had discovered he was employing 2 undocumented workers and threatened to report them to immigration authorities if he refused to participate or if he ever disclosed their arrangement. Those guys have families, kids in American schools. Patricia said she'd make one phone call and have them deported if I didn't cooperate with her plans. Thomas's attorney presented documentation showing Patricia had received over $240,000 in kickbacks over 18 months. Bank records revealed deposits to Patricia's personal accounts that coincided exactly with Morrison Construction's payment schedule. My client is prepared to testify about Ms. Morrison Chen's coercion and to provide complete financial records documenting the kickback arrangement, the attorney announced. In exchange, he's seeking consideration for his cooperation in exposing this fraud. With Thomas's testimony and financial records, the criminal case against Patricia became ironclad. But her retaliation efforts were intensifying. On Tuesday morning, I arrived at work to find rumors circulating that I was having an affair with Nathan Rodriguez and had fabricated the entire fraud scheme to eliminate Patricia as a romantic rival. The rumors were absurd. Nathan was happily married with 3 children, and I'd had exactly 4 conversations with him before this entire situation began. But they spread rapidly through social media and office gossip networks. Nancy Williams approached me in the break room, her expression confused and concerned. Carly, people are saying some really weird things about you and Mr. Rodriguez. I know it's not true, but I thought you should know what's being said. Who's spreading these rumors, Nancy? I heard it from Jake Harrison's wife at the grocery store yesterday. She said Jake told her the whole fraud investigation was just a cover story for a romantic scandal. Jake Harrison, our suspended HR director, was apparently Patricia's final weapon. Even though he was facing his own criminal charges, he was actively spreading defamatory stories, to damage my credibility. Maria Santos filed emergency restraining orders against both Patricia and Jake, demanding they cease all defamatory communications. But the damage to my reputation was spreading faster than legal remedies could contain it. That evening, as I walked Emma to soccer practice, she asked me a question that broke my heart. Mom, why are people saying mean things about you on social media? Emma was 11 years old, smart enough to understand that something serious was happening, but too young to comprehend the full complexity of adult workplace warfare. Some of her friends' parents had seen the social media rumors and were asking questions that eventually reached Emma. Sometimes when people do bad things, they try to blame other people to avoid getting in trouble, I explained as we sat on the bleachers. Right now, some people are spreading lies about me, but the truth will come out eventually. Are we going to be okay? Emma asked, and I heard the worry in her voice that she was trying to hide. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be fine. I promise. But privately, I wondered if Patricia's campaign of character assassination might succeed even if the criminal case against her was solid. Rumors and innuendo could destroy reputations permanently, regardless of eventual legal vindication. The investigation was revealing the full scope of Patricia's schemes, but her counterattack was threatening to destroy my personal life in ways I hadn't anticipated. The battle was far from over. The breakthrough came on a Wednesday morning in late October, exactly 6 weeks after Patricia's initial suspension. District Attorney Rachel Hamilton called Nathan personally to inform him that criminal charges were being filed against both Patricia Morrison-Chen and Jake Harrison. We're charging Ms. Morrison-Chen with wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and civil rights violations, DA Hamilton explained during a conference call that included Nathan, our company attorneys, and me. Mr. Harrison is facing conspiracy and civil rights charges for his role in the discriminatory termination scheme. The criminal complaint detailed 15 separate felony counts against Patricia, each carrying potential prison sentences of 2 to 10 years. The evidence package was overwhelming: bank records, email communications, Thomas Morrison's testimony, forensic accounting reports, and the electronic logs showing her deletion attempts. But the announcement that truly vindicated my courage came that afternoon. The Illinois Department of Labor and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission announced they were launching a joint investigation into discriminatory practices at our company and potentially dozens of other regional firms. This case has revealed systematic age and gender discrimination that appears to extend beyond a single company, announced Labor Commissioner Diana Walsh at a press conference I watched from Nathan's office. We're investigating whether similar schemes are operating throughout the state's corporate sector. The news coverage was extensive. Channel 7's investigative reporter Linda Chen, no relation to Patricia, had been following the story for 2 weeks, and her expose aired that evening during the 6 o'clock news. A routine workplace suspension has uncovered what prosecutors are calling one of the most sophisticated embezzlement and discrimination schemes in recent Illinois history. Linda Chen reported standing outside our office building. The investigation began when employee Carly Thompson noticed irregularities in vendor payments and had the courage to document and report what she discovered. The news report included interviews with several of Patricia's former victims. Susan spoke eloquently about the psychological impact of being targeted. They make you question everything about yourself: your competence, your value, your future. It takes tremendous strength to rebuild your confidence after that kind of systematic abuse. Diane appeared on camera to describe the financial devastation. I went from a $64,000 salary to $12 an hour overnight. My retirement savings are depleted. At my age, starting over is terrifying. But the interview that moved me to tears was with Linda Garcia, who spoke about the broader implications. This isn't just about money or jobs. It's about dignity and respect. Women who've dedicated decades to building their careers shouldn't have to fear that their age makes them targets for elimination. The news report mentioned me by name as the whistleblower whose investigation had exposed the schemes. Within hours, I was receiving calls from other companies' employees who suspected similar problems in their workplaces. Nathan called me into his office Thursday morning with an offer I hadn't expected. Carly, I want to create a new position in our company: Director of Employee Advocacy and Ethics Compliance. I want you to develop systems to prevent this from ever happening again. and I want you to serve as an ombudsman for employees who have concerns about discrimination or retaliation. The salary was $85,000 annually, nearly double my previous income, with comprehensive benefits and a budget to implement company-wide ethics training programs. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm honored by this offer, but I need to know something. Are you offering me this position because you feel guilty about what happened or because you believe I can actually make a difference? Nathan's expression was serious. I'm offering you this position because you demonstrated exactly the kind of ethical courage and analytical thinking our company needs. You saw problems that everyone else missed, you documented them methodically, and you had the strength to speak up when it could have cost you everything. Those are the qualities I want in a senior leadership role. I accepted the position that afternoon. The news got even better on Friday. Maria Santos called to inform me that the class action lawsuit filed by Patricia's victims had reached a preliminary settlement agreement with the company's insurance carriers. Each terminated employee will receive compensation ranging from $45,000 to $87,000 depending on their length of service and the financial impact they suffered, Maria explained. The company is also providing positive references and career placement assistance for anyone who wants it. But the most satisfying news came the following Monday. Patricia's personal assets had been frozen, pending criminal trial, including that the luxury car and vacation property she'd purchased with embezzled funds. Her brother-in-law's construction company was being liquidated to pay restitution, and Thomas Morrison was cooperating fully with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. Jake Harrison had already pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges and agreed to testify against Patricia. His plea agreement included a 2-year prison sentence and permanent disbarment from HR practice. The defamation campaign against me had also backfired spectacularly. Maria's investigation had traced the malicious social media posts to accounts controlled by Patricia and Jake, providing additional evidence of retaliation and harassment. The restraining orders were made permanent, and both faced additional criminal charges for witness intimidation. Most importantly, the rumors about my alleged affair with Nathan were thoroughly debunked. When security footage revealed we'd had exactly 4 interactions before the fraud investigation began, all of them brief and professional. The gossip networks that had spread Patricia's lies were now spreading apologies and corrections. Emma noticed the change in my demeanor immediately. "Mom, you look different," she said as we prepared dinner together on a Tuesday evening in November. "Different how?" "Happier, like you're not worried all the time anymore." She was right. For the first time in months, I felt secure. The financial pressure was gone. My reputation was restored, and I was about to begin work that felt genuinely meaningful. But the most profound change was in my relationship with my colleagues. Women throughout the office approached me to share their own experiences with workplace discrimination and to ask advice about reporting concerns. I'd become an unofficial resource for people who previously had nowhere to turn with problems. Nathan had also implemented sweeping changes to company policies. All managers now received mandatory training on age and gender discrimination. The vendor payment system had been redesigned with multiple authorization requirements and automatic auditing flags for unusual patterns. An anonymous reporting system allowed employees to raise concerns without fear of retaliation. "This company is going to be a model for ethical workplace practices," Nathan told me during my first week in the new position. "What happened here will never happen again, and I want other companies to learn from our experience." The transformation was remarkable. In just 2 months, we'd gone from a workplace where systematic abuse was hidden and enabled to one where ethics and transparency were actively promoted and protected. Patricia's trial was scheduled for the following spring, but her attorney had already indicated she would likely accept a plea agreement rather than risk a lengthy prison sentence. Thomas Morrison's cooperation had made the evidence against her overwhelming. On a cold Thursday morning in December, I stood in Nathan's office, looking out at the parking lot where this entire journey had begun. 6 months ago, I'd been a vulnerable single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Now I was a senior leader with the authority and resources to protect other employees from the abuse I'd experienced. The fight had been worth it, but more than personal vindication, I'd learned something profound about the power of documentation patience and moral courage. Patricia's schemes had succeeded for years because her victims felt isolated and powerless. But when people stand together and demand accountability, even the most sophisticated abusers can be brought to justice. The vindication was complete, but the real work was just beginning. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of the Chicago Convention Center, looking out at an audience of 400 business leaders, attorneys, and employee advocates. The National Conference on Workplace Justice had invited me to speak about turning personal adversity into systematic change, and my speech was titled, "The Power of Courage from Victim to Advocate." When I walked into my manager's office that morning and heard the words, "You're suspended indefinitely without pay," I thought my career was over. I began. I never imagined that my request for 2 hours to handle something would eventually lead to criminal convictions, policy reforms, and a national conversation about workplace discrimination. The audience was attentive as I described the investigation process, the importance of methodical documentation, and the courage required to challenge powerful people who abuse their positions. But the heart of my speech focused on the transformation that occurred after justice was served. Patricia Morrison Chen had accepted a plea agreement the previous month, receiving a 4-year prison sentence and an order to pay $637,000 in restitution. Jake Harrison had served 18 months in minimum security prison and was now working at a nonprofit rehabilitation center, apparently genuinely remorseful about his role in the discrimination scheme. More importantly, all 11 of Patricia's victims had received full compensation and positive career outcomes. Susan had used her settlement to open her own coffee roasting business and was now employing 6 people. Diane had returned to corporate accounting at a firm that valued her experience. Linda Garcia had started a consulting practice, helping companies develop age-inclusive marketing strategies. The real measure of justice isn't just punishment for wrongdoers, I explained to the audience. It's whether the system changes to prevent similar harm in the future. Our company had become a case study in ethical transformation. Employee satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvements in workplace culture, and we'd had 0 discrimination complaints filed in the past year. The anonymous reporting system I'd implemented had helped resolve dozens of concerns before they escalated to legal issues. Nathan Rodriguez had been featured in Harvard Business Review for his leadership in addressing corporate misconduct, and our company had received the Illinois Ethics in Business Award for our comprehensive reform initiatives. But the most meaningful change was personal. Emma, now 12 years old, had written a school essay about her mother's courage that won the statewide contest for young writers. Her essay was titled, "Why My Mom is My Hero," and her concluding paragraph brought tears to my eyes every time I read it. My mom taught me that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. She showed me that one person can make a difference if they're brave enough to stand up for what's right. When I grow up, I want to be as strong and honest as she is. Standing at the convention center podium, I saw faces in the audience that reminded me of my former colleagues. People struggling with workplace abuse, unsure whether they had the strength to fight back, afraid of the consequences of speaking truth to power. "I want each of you to remember something important," I said as my speech concluded. "You are not powerless. Documentation is your weapon, truth is your shield, and courage is your superpower. When you stand up for yourself, you're also standing up for everyone who comes after you." The standing ovation lasted nearly 2 minutes. But more importantly, I was approached afterward by dozens of audience members who shared their own stories of workplace injustice and asked for advice about fighting back. 3 weeks after the conference, I received a call that brought everything full circle. Rachel Hamilton, the district attorney who had prosecuted Patricia, invited me to join a statewide task force on corporate fraud prevention. "We need people with your expertise and perspective to help us identify systematic problems before they cause widespread harm," she explained. "Your case has become a model for how thorough investigation and victim cooperation can expose complex schemes." I accepted the appointment, knowing it would mean additional responsibilities, but also greater opportunities to protect vulnerable workers throughout Illinois. On a warm Saturday evening in June, exactly 1 year after Patricia's suspension, our entire extended family gathered for Emma's 13th birthday party in our new backyard. David had helped me buy a house in a better school district using the signing bonus from my promotion and settlement funds as the down payment. Emma's friends played in the pool while the adults sat on the patio watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. My mother, whose medical bills were now fully covered by my improved insurance, sat beside me reading a book about workplace advocacy I'd recommended. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished," my mother said quietly. "But I'm even prouder of how you've helped other people find their strength." David approached our conversation carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. Our relationship had evolved into something I'd never expected, a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared commitment to Emma's well-being. "You know what I realized?" David said, settling into the patio chair beside us. "That night, you called me for help with the financial evidence. I thought I was helping you solve a work problem. I didn't understand I was witnessing someone transform into a leader." Emma ran over from the pool water, dripping from her hair, her face bright with excitement. "Mom, can you tell my friends about how you caught the bad people at work? They think it's like a detective story." I laughed, remembering how terrifying and uncertain everything had felt during those first difficult weeks. "Maybe later, sweetheart. Right now, let's focus on celebrating you." But as I watched Emma return to her friends, I realized she'd learned the most important lesson of all, that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they choose courage over comfort, truth over convenience, and justice over personal safety. 2 years later, the state task force I joined had implemented new requirements for corporate fraud reporting, and similar cases were being identified and prosecuted throughout the Midwest. The Morrison-Chen protocols, systematic documentation, and reporting procedures I'd developed were being used by companies across the region to prevent discrimination and embezzlement schemes. My work had expanded beyond our company to include consulting with organizations nationwide, helping them build ethical cultures and protection systems for vulnerable employees. The little girl who once thought her career was over had become a nationally recognized expert in workplace justice. But the deepest satisfaction came from smaller victories. The emails from women who'd found the courage to report abuse because they'd heard my story. The policy changes that protected workers at hundreds of companies. The knowledge that Patricia's victims had rebuilt their lives and careers stronger than before. Standing in my office on a quiet Friday afternoon, looking at the framed photo of Emma receiving her writing award, I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed because I'd asked for 2 hours to handle something. Those 2 hours had indeed changed everything, not just for me, but for countless people who would never again face the systematic abuse that Patricia had perpetrated for years. The most profound lesson I'd learned was that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is feeling terrified and choosing to do the right thing anyway. It's believing that truth and justice are more powerful than money and manipulation. It's understanding that your actions can create ripples of positive change that extend far beyond your immediate circumstances. Every morning when I walk into our office building, I remember the woman who sat in Patricia's office, feeling powerless and afraid. That woman found strength she didn't know she possessed, and she used that strength to transform not just her own life, but the lives of everyone around her. The fight for workplace justice continues every day in every office, in every situation where someone with power chooses to abuse those without it. But now, there are more people ready to fight back, more systems in place to protect victims, and more examples proving that ordinary people can defeat even the most sophisticated schemes when they refuse to give up. Have you ever faced a situation where you knew something was wrong, but felt afraid to speak up? What gave you the courage to take action, or what held you back? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, because every person who shares their experience helps someone else find the strength to fight for justice. Thank you for following my journey from victim to advocate. If this story inspired you to stand up for what's right in your own life, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they're not powerless, that documentation and courage can overcome even the most intimidating opponents. Remember, you are stronger than you know. Your voice matters more than you think, and your courage can change not just your life, but the lives of everyone who comes after you. Until next time, keep fighting for justice and never give up on doing what's right.